Can I talk quickly about the Martech stack?
Yeah, let's.
I said this before. I think that you can tell everything about a startup based on their Martech stack.
I love it. Tell me more.
I think we should talk about it.
The Margeteers.
Hi, Marg.
Hi, Margaret.
I'm really excited that we're going to be starting a new series today.
Yeah.
What we are going to talk about, we actually have lots in common, despite you being where you live in many states and me being across the pond in London, or you're across the pond. One of us is across the pond. I'm not sure which one. We can take our chance. But we both are fractional CMOs. And what I thought would be really interesting and helpful is just have a conversation about different stages of startups, different stages of growth, and when a company might bring in a fractional CMO and what they might hope to achieve at those different spaces. I will say that, so we'll talk first today about kind of post proof of concept. Your product works. You're going to market, your product works, you had either seed funding or the family and friends, and kind of what does that mean? And then we'll go on to a different couple of stages of growth in other episodes within this series. We might hit some of those accidentally within this, but that's what happens. And I guess I kind of want to start by saying that one of my aims as a fractional CMO is that my client outgrows me.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
I love, I want to come in, I'm good for a certain amount of time, but if we've set this up correctly for scale, if we've set this up correctly to grow, there's going to be a moment where you're going to bring all of this in-house for full-time players. We can have a discussion if I'm the right person at that time. That's a different thing. But the aim is always we're setting you up so that you outgrow me and go on to your next stage of growth. And I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think from the client side, they really need to think about what it is that they're trying to achieve and what phase that they're in, and then bring in talent accordingly, regardless of what it's called, whether it's called a fractional CMO or, a marketing firm as an outsource, whatever the case is. Mm-hmm. It really needs to be from a perspective of the combination of needs and also early on what they can actually afford to do. So there's an element,
reality.
If they're in seed, there's the reality of a constrained budget approach. And thankfully, there's so much that you can do now that doesn't have a lot of cost. It can be a reality, but you still have the cost of the person and the infrastructure, the Martech stack, that are considerations, even if everything that you're doing is organic and digital.
Can I talk quickly about the Martech stack?
Yeah, let's.
I said this before. I think that you can tell everything about a startup based on their Martech stack.
I love it. Tell me more.
I'm thinking about a client before where I was like, what is your setup? And they're like, HubSpot, everything. And I just thought, okay, they're straightforward. They know what they want. There's no extra fuss. There's no extra complication. It's going to be, they want to be as straightforward as possible. Then another client who had 4 different items that all do an element because it serves somebody. None of these different tools could 100% serve anybody. None of these tools spoke to everything. And they all could do one thing really well, but not in a cohesive environment. And guess what? That company, people could do things really well, but not in a cohesive environment. And it's really interesting to me, even though marketing tends to be, siloed, tends to be often its own thing in the product-led tech companies that you and I have worked for, marketing is often an afterthought, or because somebody's made you do it, or you should have it or that thing, despite the fact that your next raise, most of your money is going to go to marketing and sales.
In sales, yeah.
Significant amount will go to product, but it's these spaces. So I just always think it's quite funny and like how you get boots on the ground and I'm like, well, tell me about your Martech stack. And then they do, and I do jump to a lot of conclusions that more times than not are accurate about a reflection of the entire company.
Very, very interesting.
What do you think?
I like that. I'm probably one of those folks who has the multiple systems in place, but they're.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I'm not just saying like that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that it tends to be a reflection of multiple systems are good, you know, because typically it means that there's a purpose and there's a greater thought that has happened. Because a lot of the time at this stage of a company, I might be their first marketeer. I'm certainly their first senior marketeer.
Okay, gotcha.
And so they've been managing. So I'm not against having multiple tools. All of the tools, I'm just saying, why do we have it and how does each of those tools align to your greatest thing that you're trying to achieve, the greater objective, and things just can get forgotten.
Yeah, I think the why and the how are definitely really important. You know, coming into an organization and they have, you know, HubSpot, probably the startup package of HubSpot.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to, in that seed route, because we're still talking about the early stage, there's probably a lot there that will work for them. What I try and do is have as much technology come to bear as possible where we can optimize.
Mm-hmm.
So make things as automated as possible, make things as kind of workflow oriented as possible. Like, you know, what are you starting with? What's the end result that you want? And how do you sew those together? And so typically for me, a Martech stack will have a combination of, you know, CRM tools. There's some sort of prospecting database subscription of some sort where you can have access to decision makers, you know, buying signal data, that sort of stuff. But then also on the execution side, how are you building out the assets? So, you know, what kind of infrastructure do you have for content creation and generation? You know, really thinking about the whole life cycle from early, you know, prospecting, engagements, the whole way through the customer acquisition life cycle, and then making sure that there's that underpinning of the ability to actually create content, manage content, measure results, you know, benchmark, figure out where you're at KPI wise, and be able to identify gaps so that you can improve. Because really what I would hope is that by the time you're moving beyond seed and you're going into a more structured, you know, funding rounds, you need to have some sort of really good idea of what works on customer acquisition, even if you can't scale it yet. And so you have to have some level of underpinning of tech stack there in order to be able to say, here's our use of funds when we get the money. You know, we've identified the ICP, we know how they buy, we know when they buy, we know where they are. We've A/B tested, you know, we have a good idea of what the content strategy is. We have a good idea of the call to action. We have the way to engage once we've, you know, reached them. We have a way to engage with them. And then we have a way to take them through a structured sales process and then close the deal. And then once their customers, communicate with them. So that's kind of, those are the kind of footprint areas that I look at to make sure that we have all of that in place. So HubSpot or something like HubSpot, you know, can serve a nice chunk of that, but not necessarily all of it.
I think so. There's two things I want to comment on for that one. So number one, as far as because I'm in the UK and Europe, because of GDPR rules, very few Martech stacks come with a database behind it. So that's a different challenge that we have to overcome. And how we've done that is primarily trying to do, it does force you to be more cognizant of your persona, if you will, and going more thinking about partnerships and who has the databases from that standpoint. There was the glory time where you could buy databases, and that's not legal, so we don't do that now.
We're not doing it in the States either, by the way. Like,
you can't. Okay.
the majority of people are not purchasing lists. Well, even if you do purchase a list, almost every system, when you go to upload a list, will ask you, do you own this list? Do you have a legitimate interest in the origins of this list? You're not allowed to, and nor would I ever upload data that's like a purchase list into a CRM system and start blasting people. Yeah, it's not done here either.
So if you have, and then I'm the same way, like I come in and I say, my goal here is to make you as digitally advanced as possible, as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
We rarely get there. It's I come in with the intention, life happens, but that is always the intention, because I think that's setting up, like, the scale happens because of your product, of course, and how you're selling it, but also like this seed post POC stage is all about infrastructure to me. It's all about infrastructure. It's about your stack. It's about our content themes, and it's about focus. I think this stage people have a lot of, like, what I call like magpie disease. Like, everything is a distraction, everything is an opportunity, and it's saying, nope, you have devoted this much time to build this much product. You have a proof of concept. Can you afford to do the growth that somebody's just come up with an idea of to build on it? But it's just a lot of talking to it. So if you're building at this stage, you've come in, you want to have this space. What are the, so you said CRM, you said like perhaps attached to a database. You said email? Like, what are the other couple of things that you'd say must be done and must be set up in that stage?
Well, I consider every SaaS or every piece of tech we consider part of the Martech stack.
Mm-hmm.
So, we'll include in that, content development. We include in that the actual website stack.
Okay. Yeah.
As part of that, right? Because I like to integrate things like, landing pages and all that sort of stuff into there so that we can have the data on the back end to see how everything is performing.
Mm-hmm.
So really, it's a matter of, I think, almost a spider web of vertical tech. So I think I wind up being your case study of what you don't like, I think, is what I wind up implementing.
Sorry, I do like that. I like when everything talks to each other, when it has a purpose.
Yeah,
you're creating an integrated. You're talking about an integrated portion. What I was saying is that when these things come up, they're not integrated, and they've been adopted for one. They've been put in place because they have one feature, then that one feature works really well, and then they come and they have this one has one feature, and that one feature works really well. And I look, and we can connect those two things so that they talk, so they all can perform better. And rarely are they all connected.
I gotcha. So for me, the connection is one of the most important pieces, because I look at everything, and maybe it's my systems thinking, and maybe it's my background as product manager, but I think of things in a life cycle, and I think about things from a workflow perspective. And so literally architect the workflows, from point A to point B to point C, and then figure out where those integrations need to happen. Okay. And whether it's something, simple like Zapier, and then, having a little plugin that correlates one thing to another, or if it's something like, okay, here's how we're measuring A/B testing, and then we have a workflow then for how we take those learnings and then leverage them going forward. So really, I think it's I think one thing that we're discovering in this conversation is that there's more than one right answer.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. And I think there's also the thing is there's some of people at this stage where you don't need all of the tools yet. You don't need everything space. I mean, I would love at this time of a company that we also just discuss how we use data organization, because CRM typically is used by marketing and sales and maybe some other people, and maybe your help desk is on the other side of it. And setting up those rules at this stage would be absolutely ideal, because I think going from this seed to Series A, the company is, might just be 15 people. With the add of one person changes the entire culture quite quickly. And so how do you get from this space to make sure that, yes, we understand with one person added in, our culture is going to change. Here's the preservation that we want to hold on to. Here's what we're open to. But here's the data rules and why we've done it. And hopefully you can build it at this time, knowing that it's going to grow and scale over time. But if you have the foundations that can say, this is how we're going to do attribution, a click-through means this. I think those kind of things at least starts a playbook that helps somebody come in and then add their own, twist to it or evolution that needs to happen, rather than you tend to kind of restart every time a new person comes in.
Right. It's interesting that you're talking about this, when I envision like a 15-person startup, it's interesting because what might be happening at this time, and maybe that new person who's coming in might be where the company is transitioning from the CEO or founder being the one who's really getting those first adopter marquee customers, making sure that we're proving product market fit, maybe with some, internal sales folks that are, early stage or mid stage in their careers, to bringing in and having at that point, hopefully, the money to pay for a sales leader. And when you bring the sales leader in, that can be a very dynamic cultural shift that can impact, what you're doing in the Martech sales tech stack. And just making sure that there's alignment there, I think, is really key, and getting that conversation going early in the process so that there's not disruption. Because if you're bringing in a sales exec at this point who is, wants to be working in spreadsheets or something, it throws all of the measurements off. It throws your ability to figure out how to scale off.
Are you allowed to work in spreadsheets?
What do you mean allowed?
No, just again, I'm kind of going back to GDPR, because you have to sort of have a record that somebody's opted into.
Well, for any opt-in, I'm just talking about like prospecting.
Fine. Okay.
A lot of times here, people will go in through LinkedIn Navigator or Follow, and they'll be generating lists and all that sort of stuff before the opt-in happens. And, that can be scary. We definitely have to be compliant. We have CCPA here, and there's evolving legislation on a state-by-state basis, because, the United States is just a bunch of little countries, right? Like, there's so many things that are state-specific. It's almost like having country-specific rules. And so making sure that you're compliant in each one of those can be, a heavy lift if you're not careful. But there's definitely work happening in spreadsheets, because I see it happening. What I try and do is get everybody into the tech stack as soon as I can. But we do still wind up with folks who are just like, I'm happy and comfortable with a spreadsheet. Thank you.
Okay, so we've talked about, so we're doing Martech, we're building for scale. We haven't talked about, like, what are your KPIs at this stage of the company? And what does your marketing team look like at this stage of the company if you're coming as a fractional CMO?
Don't you think it's there's a lot of variety in that? So
totally. Yeah. As you said, there's not one good answer. I'm just trying to
I think, the kinds of KPI, you have your foundational KPIs no matter what. You have
Sure.
things that are around, I look for leading indicators at this stage, right? What are the leading indicators that kind of give you the information that you need to know how things are going to shape out once you have more funding and you're starting to scale? So, leading indicators are things like, how hard is it, and how much time does it take for you to identify and qualify prospects? Once you've identified and qualified a prospect, how long does it take to get them through the structured sales process? Looking at things like the cost of customer acquisition can be a little bit challenging in that a lot of the infrastructure doesn't exist in the startup yet when it's really early for all those kinds of measurements because a lot of systems aren't in place. But having a gut feel for, wow, we're spending way too much on whatever it is, events or whatever the case is. I think it's important to just have dialogues about that. So I think this particular stage is the one where there's a lot of unknowns. And even the best KPIs, you just don't know if you're going to reach them or not, because you start out, whatever that planning cycle is, you start out with what you think are the KPIs that are going to get you where you need to go.
Yeah.
But you're still in that very nuanced stage where you're still trying to figure it out. So you might have a product that works and you think you have product market fit, but you haven't optimized yet for the structured sales process. You haven't optimized yet for customer acquisition costs, because things like that only happen with scale. You can model it at an early stage, but you can't optimize it yet.
I think my thought too, as far as like your like leading indicators, sometimes I'll come in and say our KPIs this year, this section of time, whatever, is simply to set those benchmarks. So exactly what you're talking about, like what is the CPA? We don't know yet, but once we have, or the sales cycle, maybe we don't necessarily know yet, because obviously a POC sales cycle is very different than the learnings you've had. So sometimes I'll come in and say, like, we just want to establish these things, and knowing these numbers as a beginning benchmark, actually, in my opinion, is a huge advancement forward to be able to say, this is where we're starting from. And then to your point about how utilizing technology that can optimize, you need to know what you're going to optimize. I started to really smile when you were saying, putting this in, what is this, what this, and because I always say too, we also have to be stronger than the spreadsheet. Like,
Yes.
like we made up these KPIs, like we set this down because we need a starting point. And then we've said, this is what we're going to aim for. And then it just depends on how hard you want to be on yourself, on how, when I was at Google, there was a point with your KPIs or your OKRs where if you achieved 100% of your OKRs, they said those weren't good enough. You didn't set hard enough OKRs, like you should not set them all. So if you want to have this mindset of good, we shouldn't set it, fine. I mean, that's an individual choice of culture. But there is this moment sometimes where I've sat down and people are like, well, we didn't hit it. I go, we didn't hit the thing that we 100% made up when we had no data whatsoever. Okay, like we have to be stronger than the spreadsheet and know that we were just trying to establish a baseline. Now we have more information. So now we can do some smoothing, smooth it. The more information, now we'll go to the next year and hopefully plan it a better way. But there is, I mean, I'm sure you've had so many, I'm laughing because we've had so many of those conversations where we didn't hit it. I go, we didn't hit the pretend thing. Yeah, and at this stage too, there's less, I think what's interesting too, we talk about risk.
Yeah.
The risk at this stage to the leadership team tends to be, how do I say this? It's very emotional. This is an extraordinarily emotional stage, especially if you're a first-time founder, because you've left something, you've saved for something. And so everything feels really heightened. Entrepreneurship at every stage is quite heightened. We'll do a different series of that at some point and the ramifications of those things. But at this stage, for sure, like there's a lot of, I come into this stage too with a lot of sensitivity of, you know, this kind of seed post POC. They could be 1 year old, they could be 8 years old. You know, like they have been kind of going for a certain amount of time, and they'll keep on going because there is a belief and a vision and some indicators, hopefully, that there is market fit, or there is something that wants to happen. But yeah, those are my thoughts as far as have to be stronger than the spreadsheet.
I love that. I love that. The other question that you asked is, what does the team look like? And, you know, it's kind of interesting because, again, I don't think there's one flat answer, but I think it's important for the client company. So if you're the startup and you're trying to figure out kind of where to invest and what your marketing complement should look like, you know, the foundational piece is having a marketing leader, whether it's a CMO or not, having a marketing leader who understands the whole footprint and then can help you adapt and bring in, you know, talent, whether it's contract or otherwise, that's going to help you with those core fundamentals. So the prospecting is super, super important. Lead gen, super, super important. Brand building starts to get important. And then just making sure that you have all of those fundamental, you know, messaging pillars and the content strategy. And so whether that's in some case the fractional person doing that themselves, hopefully there's someone who's you know, skilled at the practicum too, not just the theory or the strategies, but actually able to step in and, if not even perform the work, but know what it takes to get the work done, and then bring in the right talent. I think that's really, really important. And I think, again, early on, what you might need might be changed regularly. And, you know, looking at the outsource model, I think, is a really smart move for early stage, because it allows you to address the most important things with the right amount of money and resources early on. So if it's, you know, okay, we need brand. You know, we don't know how to do brand. We need brand. So you engage a brand expert or a branding firm, and then you go and you get all of those pieces in place with a integrated kind of consultative approach with the leadership team. And then now you have your underpinnings. Okay, now we've got brand, we got our messaging pillars. Okay, now we have to start working on content. How's that done? And then bringing in the talent to do that. So whether that's using something like Upwork, or, you know, a really great CMO often has a network of people that they've worked with in the past, that are trusted, that they know can actually execute work. That's really great. And a lot of times that can get you through until you're ready to actually hire a marketing team, and scale up a marketing team, you know, over time. And again, you know, as with most of these things, I think it's different for each company.
Yeah.
Needs to be.
I think that this stage, and I would say this, but I do think this stage is one of the most important for a fractional CMO to be part of, because usually what happens is there's a few junior people who are super keen and they're doing loads and they're great. They're great. You love them, but they're not necessarily doing the most strategic activities to focus in on the growth. And I think that this is the spaces like your growth can go faster, bringing in an expert, whatever many days a month, to at least guide your internal team now to stay in a focused way. And quite frankly, say no to a lot of things as well, just saying that's a distraction, that's expensive. Sure, if you want to do a brand, but what does brand mean to you? We won't talk about it today, but at some point we should talk about our dream brand books, because we've spoken offline of when we are given a brand book and it has like which animal the company is. And
I know.
you and I have similar opinions about that. Maybe we'll leave it. Spoiler alert, we don't love it. But I think that is that kind of space of like defining brand at this time. And again, and it's interesting you say kind of bring people in at that space. I usually have come in, there's already this brand book that has the kind of animal and stoplight they are and these kind of things. But like what is brand at this time? I think that's probably a different conversation, but it's an interesting thing because I really come in and say, what's the point of the company? What realistically are we going to try to do this year? What's one big bet you're going to try that's kind of going to push everyone a little bit further? Is that on your roadmap? Is that a marketing or sales activity? What's the Martech that's going to support that objective? What do you have here? And like, what kind of data do we have? And what kind of data are we trying to evolve into? And then saying, great, now I've just painted all of that. How are we going to reasonably deliver this when you're probably have me a few days a month, maybe a day a week? You have your, junior person in here. What can we achieve, and how do we negotiate the importance of infrastructure? That is so boring to talk about, and I talk about it all of the time because it is so important. It's so important.
It is important. It's interesting too that you're talking about that because, I think with those junior folks who tend to be in place, they'll be about the tactical pieces, and they're probably the ones that have things stuck together with bubblegum and Band-Aids, right? Just trying to do the best that they can with the knowledge that they have with, whatever current tech they've seen on TikTok being promoted. And, they're doing the best they can with the knowledge that they have.
I want to reinforce that you and I both think they are definitely doing the best they can.
Yeah,
we have no like down-looking views or animosity of that person who has chosen to fiercely join a non-proven startup. You have the most bravery of anyone.
Yeah, I was just gonna say brave.
Yeah. And they're generally just doing the best they can, and they're willing to, as you say, plaster here, but maybe just need a little bit of focus. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
yeah, no, it's good. And so far, everyone that I've run into in those scenarios has always been willing to learn and is so glad that you're there because now they don't have to be the one trying to figure out.
Yeah, or trying to convince.
Yeah.
There is a sad moment of like kind of that junior person is like, oh, I've been trying to tell them this. Can you tell them this? And like they haven't, because they're viewed so junior that maybe they haven't been fully taken on. And so like, yeah, that does happen where they're like, can you tell them this? And I'm like, oh, yes.
Yeah.
I will tell them that. And I'll be like, that they've been saying that this whole time. What a good idea. You should have listened to that.
I love that.
So we really talked a lot in this last half an hour and about lots of different things needed at this proof of concept. I think we can summarize all of it with what is the best fractional CMO going to achieve for you in this stage, with the term that I learned in business school that we hear for everything. It depends.
It depends.
That's what it depends, right? I think you and I have very similar perspectives of like the greatest value we want to build at this time is to create the strong foundation. You do not build the house. You do not build the skyscraper without a strong foundation in place. And then how do we make sure that the blueprint's carrying on with the foundation? Similarly, how do we create the rest of the blueprints again so that it's strong in place as you grow. And again, as you outgrow us, at least there's a good foundation in place for the next person that comes along.
I love it. I can't think of any improvements on that. I think you nailed it.
Yay.
Yay.
Maybe we should end there. Gold star. So thank you so much, Marg, as always. I think next time we're going to talk about fractional CMO in the Series A stage.
Yes.
And I'd want to preface it at this stage. If we said it depends here, Series A, then really people kind of go in their own space. So we'll discuss our experiences and recommendations that, again, there's lots of right answers.
Okay, there we go. Love it.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.
Talk about
All marketing and marketing for all.